I visited the Glamorgan Archives in Cardiff, and now I'm here at the Mitchell Library Archives in Glasgow to see if I can unveil more about the 1919 race riots.
I have here, this is the criminal returns for the City of Glasgow in 1919, and obviously this is a report that takes into account what happened in January 1919, and it tells you here about the disturbance of the peace. Do you want me to read it for you?
Yes, please.
In January 1919, there was considerable unrest in the city owing to the demand by the Trades Council for a 40-hour working week. A strike was declared on the 27th of January with the object of compelling all municipal and other workers in Glasgow and the Clyde area to cease work. Mass meetings were held and processions traversed the streets, seriously impeding the traffic. Mass pickets visited the public works, inducing or compelling the workers to leave. Even the public utilities were seriously menaced. The climax was reached on the 31st of January when a riot occurred in George Square following an attempt to hold the tramway cars. There was outbreaks of disorder and damage to property in various parts of the city. A number of police were seriously injured by the mob, who threw bottles and other missiles. Interestingly, it doesn't mention the race riot at all.
And is that, I mean, I'm finding that, you know, police reports, well, not necessarily police reports, but specifically the newspaper articles aren't actually as accurate as they could be.
No, and I think when we look at the newspaper articles and we look at the evidence to the trial, you will see differences. Yeah. Now, who's to know which one's right?
Yeah.
You know, but there are certainly differences there.
And do you have police records?
We have. I've got as part of the records here. We don't have the case was heard in the High Court in Edinburgh, so those records are on the National Records of Scotland, but we do have transcripts of the actual trials. This one here is relating to Emmanuel Shinwell, and this takes place in April. The trial will take place in April, and he is a constable in the Western District of the Glasgow Police. So this is a policeman's evidence about what happened. Well, this is a house, so he's asking, William Gallagher is one of the protesters. He's a famous left-wing radical in Glasgow. So they're asking the person, were you with Gallagher also on the 31st of January in James Watt Lane? Yes. Did you hear a speech delivered by Shinwell in James Watt Lane? Yes. How many people were there? About 200 or 230, 250. What kind of speech is it? It was practically on Yellow Labour. This is what he apparently came to talk about. Do you remember what he said after he dealt with Yellow Labour? He mentioned black men, and he said he himself had no grievance with these, but he said he had a grievance against the yellow men as they were cheap labour.
And in this you can see again they're trying to keep away from the racism and just keep it about the labour. Why was that? Why do you think that so many white people can attack so many black people and that it gets kept to one side and all they want to deal with, which is evident here, is the labour trial? I
think when we go on, we start to get the same repetition. So somebody's trying to stop that, saying that's not relevant. But actually, when you start to look at it and we go to further pages, they are providing the evidence about that. So that is happening.
So can we go and have a look at some of these?
We can indeed. So what we've been looking at before is the city's archives in terms of the police reports and the criminal trials. And what we have here now is some of the newspapers from special collections. And we have a number of these. The Bulletin, which is a left-wing newspaper here. And there's some wonderful pictures also in the Illustrated London News. And I think one of the things is the words tell the actual story, but a picture actually adds a lot more information about it, brings it to life, and you actually see the individuals.
I find this fascinating. Yeah. There's one of William Gallagher somewhere here.
Yeah.
You know, I've read so much about him, and so to see him there and
he's not big, is he?
He's not at all, and surrounded by police, but at the same time he's bandaged up with a huge smile on his face.
Yeah, you see the barricades here. You see somebody, I think, it looks as if they're getting hit by a big baton.
A striker struck, an incident in one of the baton charges by
the police. the kind of things that would make go across the world nowadays, isn't it?
And look at the amount of people
Look
here.
at the amount of people, it's actually huge. So it really is mass picketing, something, again, you don't see today, but you did then. So some of these photographs are about the event as it happened, and some are about the after event as the government tried to take control.
And so we have the newspapers.
And if you look at the newspapers, and again, they're telling the story here, and this is, they actually read the Riot Act, and the Riot Act read strikers and police in serious conflict, and there's a long list of casualties, and they're just telling you about all the street battles, and it's actually telling you about who's been injured. But one of the things for Glasgow is it was carried a lot of the war economy in terms of shipbuilding and things.
Yes.
So it was a huge, and the downturn hit Glasgow because of that. The downturn hit Glasgow much earlier than it happened in many other places. So a lot of it's March, and it's in March 1919 before it starts to hit. But Glasgow it hits early because they had been totally geared to the war economy. And the thing about it is there was a lot of radicalism in the places like the munitions factories, particularly in shipbuilding, so there were strikes happening. There was a lot of industrial unrest because of some of the restrictions put on them by war.
And was there a direct link?
I'm not sure whether there was a direct link. I think in terms of, and I think again, if you spoke to some of the historians, I think what happened is it started in Glasgow early on. The issues around the depression and after the war hit them first because they had been so actively involved in the war economy and the supplies for the war.
Irene, thank you so much for sharing all of this wonderful information with me. I'm going to go now to the People's Palace.
Oh, that would be wonderful for you there, isn't it?
Fiona Hayes and find out a bit more of what was going on in Glasgow in 1990.
Okay.
I thank you so much for your time.
Okay.
I've come to visit the People's Palace here in Glasgow, and it has a wonderful range of artefacts and resources that really give you a great sense of what life was like here in Glasgow in the early 20th century. I'm here to meet curator Fiona Hayes, who's going to shed some light on 1919 Glasgow. So Fiona, we're here at the People's Palace, and there is a wealth of information that spans from all the way across the board. Specifically, we're looking at 1919. Can you shed some light on what 1919 Glasgow was like?
Glasgow was very basically a large working class area, heavy engineering, shipbuilding. Lots of people been drawn in, skilled and unskilled, into the industries. Glasgow at that time was one of British cities that had incredibly poor housing conditions, real problems with overcrowding, sanitary conditions were abysmal. So you find Glasgow 1919 is really somewhere that's, you know, there's a lot of agitation, a lot of uncertainty.
Coming from so many different directions, it's just one huge climax, which really does put some things into perspective for me, because one of the things that I'm trying to find out as I go from city to city is why were the race riots kind of swept to one side? But they weren't swept to one side, they were just in and amongst so many different protests and strikes that that all just came to a head at that one time. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. This is, you know, what authorities are really nervous about that's happening in Glasgow. So, yeah, I mean, just if you look through that period, there does seem to be this sort of feeling of just sort of apprehension. You know, something is, you know, just waiting for things to happen.
I don't know what the community was like, or whether there was a thriving black community within Glasgow.
You know, there was a black community, and the interesting thing is that it's in some ways it's a very under-researched part of Glasgow's history, particularly for this period. We do know, I mean, there was particularly around the docks, you know, there was a community around sort of the sailors, you know, sometimes maybe not sort of settled, but we do know. So it's an area which I think we really need to look at more and sort of find out about things. It's sort of part of the Glasgow story that we maybe need to sort of tease out.
I remember walking through museums on school trips when I was young, and the way that I was left feeling not seeing any black heroes or heroines up there with the rest of them. So it's such a shame to discover that there's such little record of the contributions of black people here at the People's Palace. For the younger generation, there appears to be a real lack of knowledge and evidence of their heritage, which saddens me. I'm really glad that Fiona recognised this lack of acknowledgement. Hopefully, it'll be rectified in good time. I'm leaving Glasgow now, en route to Liverpool.
I'm excited to have arrived in Liverpool. It's been a long time since I've visited this city. Glasgow gave me a wealth of information, and now I'm looking forward to learning more about this great city in 1919.
We lay on the grass and we looked at the stars. You said you were from Venus and I was from Mars. And I laughed.
Indeedy. Hi. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. How was your journey?
It was really nice and pleasant and great to come and see the sunshine in Liverpool.
It's beautiful today,
Yeah, it's
isn't it?
lovely.
Well, welcome to Liverpool.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to meeting the group. They're here.
They're starting to arrive.
Lovely.
The archive is upstairs. I'm ready to lay it out if you'd like to come up and have a look.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks.
Lovely, come on.
Yeah. And so what's this project? Is this separate to Writing on the Wall?
No,
Is this
no.
part of Writing?
This is part of Writing on the Wall, and this is perhaps our fourth heritage project, I think. The archive is absolutely phenomenal. It's a collection of letters and documents that pertain to the plight of black and other racial minority seafarers, sailors and workers who were in Liverpool, demobbed to Liverpool, worked in Liverpool following the First World War in 1919. So we have letters from organisations advocating on behalf of coloured labour, as the phrase was back in the day, to the Mayor's office. And we have letters back from the Mayor's office. But most significantly, and what makes this archive really special, is we have the voices of the men themselves, and it allows us an insight into their experience and the experience of their families. It gives us a real personal insight into a period that I personally had only ever read about in textbooks.
Is it the case here that not many people know about the 1919 race riots, or is it common knowledge here in Liverpool that they took place?
I would say in the area that we are now, which is Liverpool 8, which is Liverpool's multicultural black community, it's pretty common knowledge that the 1919 race riots happened.
Before the war and potentially during the war, was there a harmony between blacks and whites working together?
I think during the war there wasn't considered to be a problem, and certainly there was not, and prior to the war there was not any level of racial violence in the way that we see it, that we see in 1919. I'm sure there were elements of racism at that time, and, you know, we've still got it today, but it certainly was nothing. You know, 1919 and the scale of violence was absolutely unprecedented, really.
Do you think there was a definite link between it going from Glasgow to London to Liverpool to Cardiff? Or was it one thing that surged the next, or was it all self-contained?
I'm not really sure, but I think the Seafarers Union played a big role. It was largely in Liverpool anyway, seafarers who were at the brunt of the riots, not exclusively, but huge numbers of seafarers were experienced that violence.
When we arrived in the building today, there was a meeting going on, that was to do with race riots, is that right?
It was, yeah. It's actually to do with the White Man March that is being planned to be held in Liverpool on Saturday by a extreme far-right organisation. But since the march was called, there has been a letter sent to the Lord Mayor that said if this march is cancelled, we will cause havoc in your city, basically, and we will come to, what was the phrase, ethnically rich areas and attack people, and there will be race riots. So it's ironic, really, that you arrived in the building to talk about race riots in 1919, and we have a black, largely black, not exclusively so, but largely black community meeting talking about protecting itself from race riots today.
I don't want to get angry. I don't want to get angry because I know that I had to live this life. I had to. You had to be strong in Liverpool. I've only heard snippets of what went on. I know people that's fathers were actually in that. Black people were rounded up from Pitt Street and such like the area of Liverpool East and marched through the streets from LA's right through to Dale Street because of the riots and because of the violence and the fear that children and women would be hurt. But most white people were scared of us and they chose to move in other places rather than stay in LA's. It was always known as this place, oh, don't go down there.
My history teacher would probably keel over if he saw me sat here doing anything to do with history, because I was like 10 miles away and I just had no interest in it actually when I was growing up. But gradually I've started having that interest, and when I was younger, admittedly, I wasn't running around going, oh, what was my heritage, where am I from? I didn't really care. But as I've gotten older, I'm hungry for it. I really am. And I suppose one of my fears for doing this documentary was meeting people that had a wealth of knowledge and me sitting there like a simpleton going, yeah, kind of, I'm not really sure I know what you're talking about. But that's how you learn, isn't it? And it's not about speaking to people that have all the answers. It's about speaking to people that have nuggets of information that fill in the gaps.
I always grew up hearing the stories of the 1919 riots and how Grandma and our aunts, because it was mainly all girls, as I say, were all locked up in Cheapside for their own safety. We still have one aunt who's alive. She's 100.
Wow, congratulations.
And she tells us, she still says about, oh yeah, I remember the 1919 riots and we were all locked up.
Really?
I don't actually think she does remember it because she was only 4 at the time.
Yeah.
I think she too, the story is as she was growing up.
But she remembered the impact that it had.
Yeah.
And how do you feel reading these accounts?
Most of them are sad and like just heartbreaking. How people can just be left after thinking that they were coming to fight for their motherland.
How do you think the government were coping with it?
I don't think they did, to be honest. I don't think the government coped with it at all. Because they're just leaving people destitute and not doing nothing about it, you know what I mean? I've just looked at some of the lists. They've got the names and addresses and even service numbers. So it'd be interesting to see if we could research them names and see how many of them actually stayed in Liverpool and how many of them actually did go home or went somewhere else.
It wasn't all bad. No way it's all bad.
It's been really moving coming to Writing on the Wall tonight, looking at the archives, listening to people share their personal accounts that have been passed down through their families. It's really put it into perspective what was happening, especially here in Liverpool. So I'm going to go away and reflect on that a bit and hopefully find out more when I go around the docks tomorrow. the city in itself has developed so much, and yet there's still so much racial tension in the air. Getting to the Cumber Imani Millennium Centre today to meet Madeleine Hennigan and seeing the police vans outside and the meeting that was going on upstairs to see what they were going to do about the protest. It just really struck me that yes, I am looking at the 1919 race riots and the aftermath thereof, but at the same time there's still so much racial tension in Britain. And it's not that I didn't know that already, it's just hit home a lot today when I saw some people that were at the archives because they were interested in it, and some people at the archives because they're passionate about getting that those stories out there and getting people to be able to see their own heritage and history, and so passionate about segregation and trying to harmonise Liverpool as a city, fighting for their rights still to this day.